Hi, welcome to Eddie's Research. Research in the news, is it true or false? So I've decided to create a video on my article. This is my first video for this article, or for any articles to be honest. I will be hopefully doing more as I go along. So I'll basically also be reading everything that's mentioned in this article, so it's easier for the eye to see, because sometimes people can visualize things better when they have a video rather than reading it. But I will be reading it as well, things written here, so you can kind of see and hear the exact wording. So this is my first post. It does seem rather long, but this is what research gives you, and I want to give as many details as possible, as opposed to this is why and no, I'm not stating how I got there. Also, any comments, feedback on this would be great. For this one, I'll be looking at Novichok, which is featuring heavily in the news. Now, this bit of research is based on the early news stories and not the latest involving two members of the British public. Bear in mind also that I did the research for these way back when it first started, kind of like finished about June time, released in July. Novichok agents is rumoured to be behind the attempted murder of two Russian citizens in the UK. But where the mainstream media, the MSM, has instantly jumped on the coattails of the government, I'm looking at something a bit different. So let's look at the usual man, woman, transgender, whatever type of person in the street. You're walking in town on a normal day and see a couple of people sitting on a park bench looking dazed and confused. Majority of us instantly think they're drunk or sometimes whacked out on drugs. Not evil to say this, it's just what human perception is. What we don't go is, oh look, two people dazed. It must be a nerve agent, even though I have no idea where they were born. Let's test it out at the nearest chemical testing facility. So within 24 hours they narrowed it down, probably using testing scans produced from many types of weapons, and said it was Russia. Even though the experts are now involved, taking samples away and may take a few weeks to test it. Smell fishy than Grimsby docks. Anyhow, let's look at this Novichok in detail. Now let's ignore Wikipedia, as I hate when people base all research on it when it's not even a real encyclopedia, and even now says it was Russia, even though no one, including the Russians, have seen any evidence. So with this in mind, where was it produced? Well, according to mainstream media, nowhere except Russia. So, this is the website from The Guardian, and there's a quote. Brett and Gordon said, the OPCW must get to Salisbury as soon as possible for an independent investigation, and they go to Russia to visit the site. If they, Russia, have nothing to hide, why would they veto it? It would be an admission of guilt. I think Putin has made his first big mistake in a long time. Shikani, if I'm saying this right, is the Russian equivalent of the UK's Porton Down, home to various military research facilities that specialises in radiation, chemical and other weaponry. Brett and Gordon, a former commander of the now disbanded UK Chemical, Biological, Radiation and Nuclear Regiment, and its NATO equivalent, said Shikani was the sole location for development and production of Novichok, dismissing suggestions that the chemical be found in other places, in the former Soviet Union such as Ukraine and Uzbekistan. They have no more anywhere else, he said. Button Gordon's assertion about Shikani is supported by, pardon my wording, Vilmerjanov, a Russian former chemist who worked on the Novichok program before defecting to the US. In his book, State Secrets and Insiders Chronicle of the Russian Chemical Weapons Program, he said Novichok was developed between 1971 and 1973 by Petr Kirpichev, a senior scientist at Shikani. Now, although I don't use Wikipedia, or use it, it's still useful for some things. In this article, under development and test sites, basically it says the exact same thing that I said earlier on, that he dismissed suggestions that it can be found anywhere else apart from the former Soviet Union, such as Uzbekistan, and that it was only produced in Russia. Now there's also this here, kind of snuck in here. In 2016, Iranian chemists synthesized 5 Novichok agents for analysis and produced detailed mass spectral data which was added to the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons Central Analytical Database. Previously, there had been no detailed descriptions of their spectral properties in open scientific literature. A small amount of Agent A230 was also claimed to have been synthesized in the Czech Republic in 2017 for the purpose of obtaining analytical data to help defend against these novel toxic compounds. So Iran managed to synthesize some. Well, let's hypothesize for a moment and assume that Iran's created the spectra and that is what Port Down used. This is the book. Is the reference book for any chemical weapons used in the wild. And this is fine, as many chemists etc. around the world use the reference books of spectra to help their analysis. And the majority of the book here is available on Google. Now obviously it doesn't have all of it, otherwise anyone can have it, but it's all here if you want to have a bit of a read, if you really want to. So, on to the main part of this research. Where else can this be from, stored, etc., as the UK government was said that they used spectra from the book to match the agent used, hence the reason for saying it was Russia. Looking online doesn't bring much up, but I stumbled across a video that was talking about Novichok, so I looked up the article it refers to. So this is the article that we're talking about, and in this patent the application was sent through in 2017. There. And we'll talk about more on that date later on. So what is this, I hear you all ask, if you can be bothered? Well, Northwestern University in the US was testing different nerve agents to see if they can decompose the nerve agent, which in turn makes it less harmful, which I would say is very good. And here's a table of the nerve agents that they tested. There. And look what's there. Novichok agents. Now this is the basic abstract. A method of using a metal organic framework, MOF, comprised of metal ion and at least a bidentate organic ligand to categorically detoxify chemical warfare nerve agents, including exposing the metal organic framework, the MOF, to the chemical warfare nerve agent and catalytically, can't say that word, decomposing the nerve agent with the MOF. So looking at this first part, what we'll do is we'll just have a look at it in its entirety. Here we go. Number 1. About this application is a continuation of part of the US patent application, which claims to benefit the US provisional, blah blah blah. So it's a continual research of a previous patent. And this invention was made with the government support under this thing here, awarded by the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, awarded by the Department of Energy. So it's partly government research and the Department of Energy. Why energy is nerve agent? I understand the Department of Energy in America do things like nuclear weapons and things like that. Now this all may be circumstantial. They may have tested some nerve agents and then explained that it can be used in Novichok and others, for example. Looking at this further and what the video article posted, it seems that they didn't use particular types of nerve agents. Considering the incredibly high toxicity of nerve agents, experiments were conducted using less toxic simulants, including blah 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 blah. So it's possibly showing that using some highly toxic simulants that have the same types of properties as nerve agents to show the breakdown using the MOF. So from this I can conclude that Northwestern University have never used Novichok in their analysis. But like I say, if you just go off what someone else says as gospel, then we may as well be sheep. Researching isn't something I or we can do for everything that is in the news, but if you're curious, have a go. So this is the article. If you really want to read it, I will scroll through it slowly. And just so you know, this is Google patents. Google just hold patents. It's not owned by Google. They just show them. And if you want to read this, you can do, but it's a bit in depth, to say the least. If you understand what all this lot means, go for it. But I won't bother unless you really, really want to. The sleeping gas there. So it kind of goes into all there. And I'll go through it slowly so you can read it if you want to, by pausing the video. But it's a bit lengthy. And there's the... Still, on the topic, I delved into the world of MOFs, which I didn't go very far into it. But then I was looking to see what I could find, and some news appeared, which again was back in April. So, the precise source of the nerve agents used to poison the Russian ex-spy and his daughter has not been verified, says the head of Portadown Lab. The Defence Research Facility, which identified the substance at Salisbury as Novichok, said it was likely to have been deployed by a state actor. Which state didn't say. We have not identified the precise source, but we have provided the scientific info to the governments, who have then used a number of other sources to piece together their conclusions. It is our job to provide the scientific evidence of what the particular nerve agent is. We identified that it is from the particular family, and that it's military grade, but it's not our job to say where it's manufactured. So it's from the Novichok family. So that is definitely interesting news. So on to Iran. So I'm going to go back to the Wikipedia link, and in there, which I will show you 1 second, here we go. So we're back here at the Wikipedia, and they have, as you probably know, or probably don't click on them, they have these little things which you can click on, and then they tell you where they've got their information from, which are very useful to see. So let's have a look at one of the links, or there's about 3 of the links. So we'll look at the first link now. Okay, so here's the first link, which is Spectroscopy Now, which is I'm assuming a well-known website. And this is the first link, and here is the little wording. The Iranian researchers synthesized 5 Novichok agents along with 4 deuterid analogies. Oh my god, they were all this compounds. Okay, so this explains the actual chemical structure of what was synthesized. Tells you here a bit more. There is more about it, explaining how they were examined, etc. And yes, the spectra was added to the database. It tells me here, new edition of the chemical weapons database. The spectra was added to that book, of which I explained earlier, and that is probably what Portadown actually used. However, who were these Iranians, and why Iran and not Portadown, or any other well-known institution? Was it regulated? Were the OPCW on hand to see the disposal of it, and if so, where's their documentation? Also, when were these synthesized? The reason I ask is that the article was written in January 2017, published anyway, and work in the US was possibly carried out in January 2017. But we're not going to look at that anymore because that was the Northwestern, and I tend to do my research as I go through it, so you kind of then spot things as you go along. These are the hidden parts that need to be researched, as well as the initial testing in the US, which we've now ignored because we don't need to look at it. So, we now have the names of the Iranians. So the second link was this one from Wiley Online Library. Again, totally legit website. I'm assuming they have loads of books on whatever they have. There's a few documents to look at which are down here under supporting information. The first one, this one here, has the names and obviously where they did the research. And then there's some spectrum here, which is this is the Novichok stuff. This is the thing that they would use for the database that you could then match this with your sample that you've got. The second link is exactly the same, more or less, as the first one. But the third, this one here, has I can't speak English sometimes, the synthesize technique, but I'm not a full-blown chemist or a chemist in any means. So ignoring all this stuff here, scroll down, and you get this. I'm assuming you have this and produces that to get this, and then you move that here and you pop that down here and you end up with this. And down here. I'm guessing that's it. I don't know, but there it is. Which is completely interesting, as the government has said that isn't available. And I found it on a website from Google that's 100% legit. So, let's have a look at these Iranians. Now bear in mind, these all may be totally innocent. I'm not going to judge research, etc. As without it, most of what we're safe from, we wouldn't have been without. So we'll go back to this first list here. The first up is this guy. If I'm saying it right or wrong, I'm sorry. It's Syed Esmail Hosseini. Number 1 and 2 is the Department of Chemistry and the Defence Chemical Research Lab. So we can see some research he's been looking at, and it seems that his chosen field is nerve agents. So you can see here we have sarin. Sarin again. This one didn't tell you a thing, and this one here didn't really tell you much. Phosphorus, and the chemical weapons, and whatnot. Now, ironically, twist of fate, not sure, I found one of his research articles, and the other 4 on the project are the same as the ones that looked at Novichok, and the same labs. It's a lengthy paper, so it's just a short summary. Okay, so here we are, and like I say, it does go on quite some depth. And this is about sarin, so this isn't what we're really after here. And you'll notice that we have certain plate people. So that's sarin. But the main one is this one. Here we have the people, and if we look here, Syed, Hamed, Ali, Mohammed and Megran, there they all are. So there's definitely the same paper as mentioned in Wikipedia, but you just can't exactly find it directly, but here it is. Now it doesn't say much in the title, it's a bit vague. You probably look at it and thinking, what the hell does that actually mean? But the bit we're after is in this abstract, and it's this bit here. Okay, that bit there. So that's the part which you're probably thinking, well, how do I know that that is it? So you remember this article that we found in spectroscopy now from the Wikipedia. There. And there. So it basically is the same thing. Okay. So let's scroll down to the actual experimental bit. So it's quite a lengthy thing. Again, if you want to read this to your heart's content, I will scroll down and I'll let you all have a look at it. But if you're not into this kind of stuff, it probably won't mean anything to you. And this is all found here on researchgate.net, which is again legit. And it's too long. I'm not going to go through it all because it's See, look there. There's the these things that we found here in. Was it in this one? No, it was in the other one, wasn't it? So there's them, and there's them. So it's the same article. So where we want to go to is experimental. And there it is again. Same phrase. So all the chemicals required for this were purchased from Sigma Aldrich, Fluker and Merck, and were used as received. So the chemicals were bought from Sigma, Fluker and Merck. Now these are all major suppliers of chemicals for most, if not all, of the labs in the world. Also in the article it explains how to actually synthesize the chemicals. Again, apparently no one else knows about this. So you know, only some person in Russia knows about this. But it is about Novichok, as I searched ages ago and I found the word Novichok came up 7 times. Now I'm not focused on these 5 in particular, as some will say then, well, if the Iranians made it and they're allies of Russia, then it still points to Russia. No, what I'm still saying is that you cannot rule out any other country from making this. These 5 were all working in a university. How many universities are there in the world doing research? Thousands. In fact, all universities do some research of some description. An interesting bit of news had actually just been released, obviously at the time of writing this. Now, the mainstream media is reporting that the OPCW have agreed it was a Novichok variant, and I'm very curious to what the variant was. But RT has another angle. So, first of all, we find the mainstream media article, which is from the BBC News, nothing to do with RT in the moment. So we'll do this snippet. The OPCW said it received information about the medical conditions of the Skripals, and Detective Sergeant Nick Bailey, it collected their blood samples, and it gathered samples from the site in Salisbury. The OPCW does identify the toxic chemical by complex formula, but only in a classified report that has not been made public. In its summary, which has been published online, the report notes the toxic chemicals of a high purity. This is understood to strengthen the argument that the substance came from Russia, because it's more likely to have been created by a state actor with the capability to make the nerve agent. The report does not name the source of the nerve agent. A state actor, well, any country is a state actor. We can be a state actor. Anyone in the world, anyone that's a country can be a state actor. But it must be Russia because it's of high purity, and like I said before, no universities have possibly made this before, have they? Sorry, get my throat there. So, let's look at the main OPCW report. So this is from their website here, and it says here that the analysis collected by the OPCW team confirmed the findings of the United K that it was of the toxic chemical. So they have confirmed the identity of what they said. So let's have a look at the actual report. So this is the actual report from the OPCW, and it's not that long. No, which is bizarre. I mean, this is the public version. And some items of use. The team was briefed on the identity of the toxic chemical identified by the United Kingdom and was able to review analytical results and data from chemical analysis of biomedical samples collected by the British authorities from the affected individuals, as well as from environmental samples collected on site. So by the looks of it, they reviewed the analytical results and data. Maybe they used their own database that I mentioned earlier in my article, which had spectra created by the Iranians at the university. If that is the case, you cannot state with a fact that it was Russia. The UK has stated only a state can sponsor this to be made. but not from what we have found, as the chemicals are all available via normal chemical catalogues. Also, it states in section 7 that they were briefed on the identity of the toxic chemical identified by the UK. Plus, I thought that the OPCW were to gather evidence themselves, but it states collected by the British authorities. Which again, when you look at the previous article, it doesn't say that. So then we go to 8. The results of analysis of biomedical samples conducted by the OPCW designated laboratories demonstrate the exposure of 3 hospitalized individuals to this toxic chemical. The result of analysis of the environmental samples conducted by the OPCW designated laboratories demonstrate the presence of this toxic chemical in this sample. The TAF team notes that the toxic chemicals of a high purity. The latter is concluded from the almost complete absence of impurities. The name and structure of the identified toxic chemicals are contained in the full classified report of the Secretariat available to state parties. High purity, they say. Not that high, otherwise they would be dead, the victims. But of course it was on a door handle. That's my cough again. So maybe the British weather diluted it down. Anyway, what's this other bit of news, I hear you all ask? Well, RT, of which of course is Russian, so it must be fake, said this. By the way, I hate the term fake news. It depends on where you live as to what the government deems fake. Being told something is fake makes the general public more dubious. Oh, by the way, I found something out on the OPCW's website. You may think it's an independent group. Not entirely. At least, looking at the fact sheets, I'm not so sure. So here's the fact sheets. The OPCW. It's by the EU. Now that could just be just the fact sheets. Nothing to do with the EU at all. Anyway, I digress. Let's move on to RT. Okay, so here we are. The RT website. And I quote, "The substance used on Sergei Skripal was an agent called BZ, according to Swiss state Spiez lab," the Russian foreign minister said. "The toxin was never produced in Russia, but was in service in the US, UK and other NATO states. Sergei Skripal, a former Russian double agent, and his daughter Yulia were poisoned with an incapacitating toxin known as that, or BZ, citing the results of the examination conducted by the Swiss chemical lab that worked with the samples that London handed over to the OPCW. So what is this 3-quinylclidinyl benzylate, or BZ, as it's easier to say? Well, let's take a look and see what we can find. Now, I've looked a little into this, not much yet, and it's not been collaborated by anyone, but RT says only US, UK, NATO states have used this, and remember, here, it was never produced in Russia. Quite possibly, having a read up on it, and it has actually been used all over the place. But is it easy to make? Well, yeah, it is. Now, following the a link directly from a Wikipedia website, obviously I looked up BZ, I came up with this. And this is a news group. So way back in the dawn of time, before forums even existed, you used news groups. And there were shed loads of news groups about all sorts of random rubbish, and this is what people used to type into. It's a way of discussing things before YouTube and Facebook and all that stuff, before most people were born. So it's a bit lengthy, so without going into it too much, here's a little snippet. BZ is the benzoic acid ester of that. I believe it was explored as a chemical warfare incapacitating agent by the CIA. I know Dr. James Moore, who used to be a prof at the U of DE and made compounds for the CIA. He tells some amazing tales. So, I wonder if we can actually have a look and see what amazing tales he had. Well, yeah, we can. So here it is. It's 9 pages of stuff. Kind of talks a bit about it. Bit of blurb. of stuff you probably don't want to read about. And then there's handwritten stuff, including how to make it, if you can read his writing. There you go. Remember, this is all on Google. Search for it, you can find it. So going back to this text from the alt groups there, scroll down and we get this bit. Synthesis is very simple. This is in the Chemical Abstracts 1959 volume 53 1385H under the heading Esters of dial hydroxyacetic acid. It references this patent. So here we go. There's 15 grams of this, whack that in there, do 30 degrees C, 1 hour. So there you go. That's how to make this big Z that apparently no one else can make. Not even Russia. But, you know, I found it, so could Russia find it? Don't know. Anyone can find this. So I've had a look and I can't find volume 53 of this Chemical Abstracts. But I did find the patent. Now, this is just an abstract from it. But it does match a lot of the above. So it's quite intense, say the least. As usual, there's my little scrolly bar, and I can scroll down. All this lot. All that lot. God help me. There he goes. But let's grab a bit here. There it is. Clear pale yellow solution was cooled to about something degrees C. Add this. Wipe that in there. Do it with this. Blah 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 blah. And it tells you, I think, the theory there is 84.2%, 3% yield. That's the purity. So, after a long bit of research, of which many of you may have actually fallen asleep or actually managed to zip to the end, you cannot conclude that only US, UK or NATO have the BZ, just in the same way you can't say only Russia, Novichok. Anyone in a research facility can make these, as I found out in my findings. Now, I'm not thinking this is going to change the government's stance for either country, but it's worth looking into things. Never assume everything is the truth, just because the news, government or whoever tells you it is. Question everything. As I said before, not everyone can do this searching, but if you're curious, why not think for yourself and look at other sources? So hopefully you've enjoyed watching this. I'll say we enjoyed, but found it interesting. Please add comments if you want to. Does it make more sense? It's hard to do with this one because it's a in-depth research, but some of the other researches that I've done, or if you're watching this and haven't done any before, but I will be doing some, might be a bit easier to do videos for, because there might be just snapshots of graphs and things like that, whereas this is a bit more going around and finding websites and stuff. And what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to do the thing where a lot of websites out there tell you it's this, and then you go, well, how do I know that it's like, well, I found this YouTube clip, and you think, yeah, you mean the one that anyone can doctor, whereas I've actually just gone for proper details and patents in various places. Okay, thank you for watching. Goodbye.